am I glad he's frozen in there and that we're out here and that he's the sheriff and that we're frozen out here and that we're in there and I just remembered we're out here. What I want to know is where's the caveman?
So, after a nice little foray into the world of horror movies, let's get back to some cryptids, eh? Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 3 of the Cryptid Iceberg Deep Dive. Today we are going to be hopping right into tier 4 of the Cryptid Iceberg. So far we've already seen a lot of the big names, a lot of the fan favorites, but it's time to dig deeper into some of these and actually come back to a few entries I had mentioned just a couple tiers back. And as usual, before we begin, please make sure to like and subscribe. Please ring that bell so you get notifications whenever I upload. Comment down below if you enjoyed this video. Give me your thoughts on these cryptids. Tell me what you would like me to do next. If there's an iceberg you want to see me do, or if there's a horror series you want to see me do another tier list for. And if you want to see what I do when I'm not doing cryptid videos or tier lists of horror movies, please tune into MagiRPG on twitch.tv/MagiRPG every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific, in order to watch Ignite Recall, an actual play of Scum and Villainy, where I play Green. But of course, that intro out of the way, let's jump right back into this iceberg. And once again, thank you for tuning in. Coming to us from the town of Elkhorn in Walworth County, Wisconsin, the Beast of Bray Road is a werewolf or dogman type cryptid that got really big back in the 90s. And much like other 90s mainstays, it faced ridicule from the greater community at large. Real quick, I want to mention how this is a werewolf type entity that was labeled a Bigfoot by the scientific community just to avoid the ridicule that comes from thinking werewolves are real, as though people don't already ridicule you for thinking Bigfoot is real. So the Beast of Bray Road is a really weird one to talk about because it's a lot older than we really think. It was first sighted in 1936, supposedly, although there are legends from First Nations antiquity that would indicate similar creatures, although not exact ones. And this is just one of many phenomena of American dogman sightings. Just like in the neighboring state of Michigan, there's a Michigan dogman, and now there's just this in Wisconsin. I think there's something about the American Midwest that just brings out the dog in you. And while there are numerous sightings of this cryptid that can be considered infamous or rather popular in the legend, I'm going to talk about two specifically, the most important ones in my opinion. The first one comes to us from the late fall of 1989 when a waitress named Lori Ann Drizzy was driving home at night, and at roughly 1:30 a.m. she saw a large canid figure hunched over some roadkill having a late night snack. Of course, like most cryptid sightings, this took place over the course of a few seconds and it disappeared as soon as the car headlights hit it, so we don't really know much going in about what this cryptid really was, beyond the artistry creation that I am showing you right here. According to her, this creature was 5'7" and weighed about 150 pounds, which sounds like it's a decently lean creature, not the bulky werewolf we think of. But this is by no means uncommon among cryptid sightings. In fact, it's pretty standard to just haphazardly guess the size of something you see for only 5 seconds late at night with car headlights. That's pretty much just the cryptid community at large. The other sighting was by a gentleman named Joe Shackleman back in 1936, where he supposedly saw a large dogman-type creature digging at graves. I'm not quite sure why anything would dig at graves, because something 6 feet down is probably not nutritious, nor is it particularly worth digging up. But, you know, I guess for dogmen, some stereotypes just don't go away. This is yet another entry where it's exactly what it says on the tin. A living pterosaur. We really do have no shortage of living pterosaur type descriptors for cryptids, but there's two in particular that I want to mention here because they're pretty popular in the cryptid zeitgeist. The first one is the ropen, coming to us from Papua New Guinea, and contrary to popular belief, it is not a New Age creationist invention, which is an entirely unhinged sentence, but one that is actually important to the mythology of the ropen as far as cryptozoology is concerned. Because it was not first sighted or created by New Age creationists. It was in fact first sighted by Evelyn Cheeseman back in the 1930s. Or at least it was first viewed by a Westerner in the 1930s, because purportedly the natives of Papua New Guinea have seen this creature in antiquity. And even back then, Cheeseman didn't say it was a pterosaur, she just noted that there was an odd bioluminescent phenomenon in the sky. But of course, this is an entity that has been taken over by New Age creationists for some weird reason. I don't normally talk about this guy, but Trey the Explainer actually has a great video going in depth on the ropen legend, and while the ropen itself is not New Age creation fodder, it was popularized by them, so I do recommend you check it out. And the other cryptid I want to talk about comes to us from Central Africa, specifically the jungles of the Zambia, the Congo, and Angola, and that is the Congamato. While the ropen is described as a large Rhamphorhynchid type pterosaur, the Congamato is described as a large Pteranodon type pterosaur. And oddly enough, both of these creatures are incredibly hard to put down a size for, with anywhere from 10-foot to 200-foot wingspans being cited for both. And of course, both also happen to dig up corpses, so that's 3 cryptids in a row that just dig up corpses now. I also feel like it should go without saying, but there is no record or scientific evidence to suggest that pterosaurs were ever bioluminescent creatures, but it's important to the legends, so I'm gonna mention it here. A creature not too dissimilar from the Mothman, the Owlman comes to us from Cornwall, England, with the first sightings taking place in 1976 in the village of Monon. These first few sightings were relayed by a paranormal researcher by the name of Doc Shields, and let's put a pin in that for now. But the first report, and the most important one, took place on April the 17th of 1976, where two young women who were camping in tents noticed a large avian figure circling the bell tower of a church. This avian figure, they said, possessed large, luminous, glowing red eyes and was, in essence, a large owl. There were a couple of other smaller sightings reported by Shields in the days and weeks following, but let's get back to Shields now because he's a huckster. In the paranormal and cryptozoological community, Doc Shields is a well-known hoaxer. So we can't really take anything he says here without a massive grain of salt or without entirely disregarding it. Or at the very least, this is the opinion of paranormal researcher Jonathan Downes. But Downes also acknowledges that there are other similar sightings of similar creatures, and he himself recorded these, so there may or may not still be some credence to the Owlman existing. But despite its popularity, it's also a cryptid that has not been spotted very often. In fact, its most prolific appearance in modern media is the episode from Lost Tapes. Or maybe that episode of Secret Saturdays, depending. Neither one are particularly accurate to the sightings, as these sightings don't really have much to them beyond I saw a big owl. This one looks cool though. I think it's objectively scarier than the Mothman because owls are horrifying. But I don't know, Owlman. The Ahul is really fun because it is a giant bat-like cryptid coming to us from one of the few places on Earth where giant bats still live. Deep within the jungles of the island nation of Java, there are legends of the Ahul, a large bat-type cryptid named for the haunting cry that it makes as it flutters through the jungle at night. It was in 1925 that renowned naturalist Dr. Edward Bartels first spotted what he thought was a bat of unusual size, and that's saying a lot considering he was there researching bats already and had noted several flying foxes. It was later on in 1927 that he was resting in his tent when he heard this unknown cry, something similar to an ahul in the jungle. Make no mistake, I really do believe the ahul is some hitherto unknown species of giant bat, because Java is already home to the golden-crowned flying fox, the largest known flying mammal, and this is an impressive bat already. But I would also like to point out that some of the ridiculous wingspans we've heard for the ahul are absolutely ridiculous. 6 to 8 feet tall with a 24-foot wingspan? Are you high? There are so many sightings of this creature that put it at more modest sizes, something more akin to actual fossil record fruit bats. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this was just the largest species of fruit bats. But no fruit bat has ever reached an 8-foot tall body and a 24-foot wingspan. This art does slap though. This is objectively just cool creature art. Oh, I called him Edward. His name was Ernest. This one's actually real. Like, no joke, of all the cryptids on this iceberg, this is the one that's actually real. But first, the legend behind it. Back in the 17th century, European, primarily Scottish, immigrants were dumbfounded when they found several cold water fish, most predominantly trout, spouting white fur. And now for the explanation, which still occurs to this day. Saprolegnia is a specific type of water mold, also known as a cotton mold, because of the fibrous white tufts that it produces. They are tolerant to incredibly cold water temperatures and can oftentimes grow inside the wounds of injured creatures, an infection that would go on to be called oomycosis. Now, why is this important to the story? Because, as I'm sure most people who live in North America and Canada, and especially along the Great Lakes know, there's a lot of trout here. And I'm sure we'd also know there's a lot of ways for trout to get injured, especially by lamprey, but also by several other water parasites, as well as just normal predation. Saprolegnia infections in fish cause them to develop these large cotton-like tufts of fur. So these were just explorers coming along saprolegnia infected fish. And this is still something that we find to this day. Sometimes there are massive saprolegnia outbreaks in fish population, most predominantly in trout. So yes, fur trout or fuzzy trout or the fur-covered trout, whatever you want to call them, they actually do exist. This is an actual confirmed cryptid. This one's a sloth. Sorry to absolutely ruin the mystery for you, but the Panama creature, also known as the Cerro Azul creature, is just a brown-throated sloth. This was confirmed by a biopsy. But first, let's get into the story. In 2009, a group of teenagers in Panama found a strange creature crawling out of the jungle that they said was making menacing movements towards them. I highly doubt it was very menacing because this is just a sloth. Now, at the time, the sloth was showing very bizarre signs of bloating and some weird hair loss. So, of course, if you don't recognize a creature with this affliction, you're going to be scared of it. And as teenagers are wont to do, they killed it with rocks and then dumped the body in a puddle. They, of course, came back to the body later, and of course, being a corpse in a puddle, it started decomposing because it was bloated and the hair was falling out even more, leaving this bizarre Mewtwo-looking corpse. They took photos of it, and then this corpse was taken away for scientific analysis, where biopsy confirmed it was just a sloth. It is a very, 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 very uncomfortably sad story. But it's just a sloth. Just like the Beast of Bray Road, this is another cryptid I alluded to in the previous parts, but now I get to finally talk about it, the Umibozu. The Umibozu, also known as the sea monk, is a large ocean spirit from Japanese mythology, often considered to be one of the largest yokai. They are described as aquatic giants that oftentimes appear in front of fishermen and castaways. They have dark gray or black skin and large glowing eyes. They appear out of storms, and they are oftentimes just generally bad news. Typically because they have a tendency to sink ships, and in fact the only way to escape their wrath is to make it to shore before it sinks your boat. Oddly enough, if you are supremely unlucky, you might come across an entire group of them, a clan or a traveling posse. I don't know what you would call this sort of thing. The Umibozu is also quite relevant and interesting because it is oftentimes the explanation for other cryptids, including the Ningen, which I spoke about last time. They're not the only ones of this type around Japan. There's also the Tate Eboshi from the western side of the island of Sado, and the Mojabune from Shiriazaki. But the Umibozu is the most well-known of all these creatures and is quite popular in Japanese media and pop culture, particularly in One Piece. On March the 1st, 1999, a large unidentified underwater sound was recorded in Antarctica between the Bransfield Straits and Cape Adair. The sound, recorded by autonomous hydrophone by NOAA, has hitherto been called Julia because it sounds rather feminine in origin. Honestly, there's not a lot to this beyond the fact that it's similar to the bloop in that it was also used as part of a hoax regarding a NASA photograph of a large unidentified underwater creature, but other than that, it's just the sound, which on its own is pretty interesting sounding, especially when you consider that it took up a large portion of Pacific Ocean. It was heard for miles. Otherwise, it's just a similar situation to the bloop. This one's got even less than Julia. This one coming from 54 degrees south, 140 degrees west. It's another underwater sound recorded by NOAA. The only thing that's even particularly noteworthy is the fact that it continues to return every single year. It's a repeating sound, being active in the late spring and early fall specifically. So maybe it's actually a creature because it originates in the same place with the same sound at the same time of year. But other than that, we don't have anything. Why is it called Upsweep? The Nuclavy is a Scottish cryptid coming to us from the Orcadian mythology of the Orkney Islands. It also happens to be the single most horrific version of a centaur I've ever come across, being quite literally a man fused with the horse. Both of them are skinless. The horse possesses a single cycloptic eye that burns with a red flame. They are covered with yellow veins. They ooze a black blood. They are a single sinewy pulsating mass, and also their legs are finned. Now, supposedly, if you are chased by a Nuclavy, the way to avoid him is to cross running water, as they have an aversion to it, so any sort of river or stream will keep you safe. They are also said to have an aversion to the smell of burning seaweed, and having smelled that myself before, I can understand where they're coming from. This is one of those cryptids that kind of toes the line between mythology and cryptozoology, but they are so objectively cool looking, I couldn't leave them off. Another cryptid that I mentioned in the previous episode I'm talking about now, the Nandi bear. Also known as the Kimaset, a name translated from the Kalenjin word demon. The Nandi bear is a cryptid from East Africa, primarily in the highlands of Kenya, described as a slope-back and shaggy-furred predator. And predator is definitely the key word because this is one of the few cryptids where you quite regularly get stories of it attacking livestock and even people. In fact, there is a report from 1914 where it attacked and killed a 6-year-old girl in a Kenyan village and went on to then rampage throughout the cattle yard. This is another one of those cryptids from Africa that has been reported by the locals for a very, very long time, but only came into the Western consciousness in the early 1900s, specifically to British colonialists in 1905. It is also very closely related to the Mingwa in terms of sighting location and in sighting description. In fact, there are a lot of times where Mingwa attacks are blamed on the Kimaset and vice versa. Descriptions of this cryptid run wild, but they're pretty consistent in that it has a large sloping back starting from the shoulders and then arching downward, oftentimes very similar to a hyena in terms of description. In fact, a lot of people believe that it is in fact just a hyena, although there are those who believe that it takes the name bear a little too seriously and is in fact a species of bear. There are even some theories that go so far as to say it is a remnant population of Deinopithecus, which was an incredibly large baboon from the late Pleistocene. Now, whatever the true identity of this cryptid is, it still remains very relevant as it is sighted in Kenya to this day and is still quite prolific in terms of attacking livestock and still, yes, to this day, attacking people. So yeah, there's a scary one for the books. While megaconda is a term that primarily refers to large snakes coming from the Amazon rainforest, giant snakes as a whole are something that isn't a stranger to the world of cryptozoology at large. We have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of stories and legends coming from all over the world about these megacondas. They come out of the Congo, out of Bangladesh, out of Indonesia, out of Vietnam, and yes, out of South America. In fact, it was supposedly in 1948 that a group of Brazilian natives killed a 131-foot-long anaconda they referred to as Matatoro, the bull killer. But of course, this is a size that is absolutely ludicrous to consider. The largest snake that we have in the fossil record is the Titanoboa, which grew in excess of 50 or perhaps even 60 feet long, depending on the estimates of the fossils we get. But even still, that's an incredible size. We don't see anything even remotely close to that. There's also no real good photographic evidence of it beyond very grainy pictures and sometimes very tacky or illegitimate reports. Megacondas and giant snakes as a concept are very prolific in mythologies though, and there's quite a few stories of giant snakes coming from members of the military, particularly the American military. And while sure you should take all those with a massive grain of salt, the fact that we have them at all and some of these accounts on their own are utterly fascinating to listen to. And I highly recommend you check out the episodes that Wartime Stories did on the topic. It's just great stuff. From the Kasai Valley, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we have the Kasai Rex. In 1932, experienced Swedish hunter John Johnson went on a hunting expedition. He left Cape Town with a few advisors and guides and traveled all the way to the Kasai Valley where he reportedly came across a massive theropod dinosaur. According to Johnson, this creature advanced upon and killed a rhinoceros, pulling it into two pieces with a single large bite. Using his camera, he took a single photo of the creature, this one. And now I need to put a pin in this right away. Kasai Rex never existed. Every single photograph we've gotten of this thing is a hoax or a recreation of the original photo. A photo that describes a theropod dinosaur even though this is clearly a monitor lizard. And this is another one of these African cryptids that I just have to talk about this now. What is with the obsession of African cryptids being extant dinosaurs? Or specifically, dinosaurs that don't even look like dinosaurs? Science marches on. That is something we have known for eons, ever since science was invented as a concept. It's always changing, and one thing that changes most often in science is the way that we think prehistoric animals look. So why do all of these cryptids coming out of deepest, darkest Africa, described in the 1920s or 1930s, look the way dinosaurs looked in the 1930s, even though that's not how dinosaurs actually looked? Because they're hoaxes. There is this weird obsession with turning Africa into a primeval land untouched by time, super far away and wild and dangerous, and what is that obsession? It's very insulting. There are so many African cryptids that have probably just been bastardized by European perception. I'm going to be talking about more of them as we get further down this iceberg, but I already mentioned Mokele Membe, and now there's the Kasai Rex. Kasai Rex is something that doesn't even exist in native folklore to Africa. Mokele Membe does, but we don't think it's a dinosaur. So, bottom line, this is a hoax. This is absolutely it does not exist, and it never did exist. Atmospheric jellyfish have to be one of the most baffling phenomenon I've ever seen in the world of cryptozoology. Being reported since the late 1960s, early 1970s, and seen globally by numerous different countries and individuals, they are, quite simply put, jellyfish that live in the upper atmosphere. The size of these cryptids is up for debate, some saying anywhere from 100 to maybe 300 feet long in some cases, with bells in excess of 50-foot diameters. But that just means they match real life jellyfish in the ocean. So that is that more realistic or less? The first ever photograph taken of one of these atmospheric jellyfish was in 1974, taken by a Danish research team, and that was then released to the public in 1979. This is that photograph, and it went on to inspire SCP-312. It also might have inspired the movie Nope. This is a consistent phenomenon that baffles not just meteorological scientists, but also top government officials, military advisors, fighter jet pilots, and countries from Japan to China, Norway, and Sweden, and France, and Canada, all over the globe. And sightings of these creatures continue to this day with no consistent uniform explanation beyond they may be related to existing UFO phenomenon, as well as the hilarious theory that they are the descendants of jellyfish from the original zero-G experiments NASA did with Earth-based jellyfish, so maybe that's the case. And with that, we are officially finished with Tier 4 of the Cryptid Iceberg. It's very weird to think that we're almost already halfway done with this project, but it's just been a lot of fun to search through, and there's still plenty more to dig into as we go further down. We are not even close to being into the weeds when it comes to the absolutely bizarre shit that this iceberg throws at you. When we get to Tier 10, man, like, wow. And like I said earlier, this project has been a lot of fun. I'm still having a lot of fun doing it, and there's still other great creators out there that you should check out. Wendigoon finally did part 7 of his Cryptid Iceberg. You know, maybe I will beat him and finish mine before he finishes his. Probably not, though. And also, as usual, MagiRPG is doing fantastic TTRPG streams on twitch.tv/MagiRPG. As I'd like to mention, I play Green in Ignite Recall, an actual play of Scum and Villainy on twitch.tv/MagiRPG every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. Please tune in and show your support there, and make sure to like and comment and subscribe. Ring that bell, comment down below anything you liked about this video, cryptids you might want me to do an extra deep dive on, future topics to explore, future icebergs to do, future tier lists to rank. And as always, thank you once again for watching. God bless.